Episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett has arrived, and I'd like to start off this review and breakdown by saying I might end up being on the controversial side of this, but this was actually my least favorite episode of the show so far. And to be clear, it doesn't mean that I didn't like this episode or hate it. I just thought the episode was meh, and that's how, if that's how you want to put it, and it was not really filler, but it kind of felt that way in certain scenes. I felt that there were a bunch of scenes in this episode that really rubbed me the wrong way and kind of annoyed me to the point where I actually started to question Jon Favreau's writing, like, a lot. And so there were some things to me that just didn't make sense, and maybe I don't know enough, but if somebody could have helped me explain it, then maybe I have a better idea of what actually happened in the show. So later on today, I'm going to have to look up a bunch of explained videos from a bunch of more knowledgeable people about Star Wars to maybe help figure out why certain scenes were the way they were. But anyways, we start off with Boba scouting Jabba's palace, and we find out later that he's doing that because that is where the ship, the Slave One, is being held, which of course is his ship. During the night, he sees a flare go off in the distance and scouts it while coming across and finding Fennec Shand after she had been shot in Episode 5 of The Mandalorian Season 2 by the gunslinger. He takes her to a mod shop to get her fixed up, which also seems to hold the same people who we saw in the last episode of the show who had droid parts attached to them. And again, I'm sure there will be some people who will get annoyed by this scene because they just do not like the look of these characters and how they all look so clean on such a dirty planet, and I totally understand that criticism, to be fair. After she's revived, she wants to give Boba a life debt and help him get out with his ship. This whole sequence does take up a lot of the show, and this is where my first annoyance took place, and it is right at the beginning as they are sneaking in and they come across a very small droid. And this droid is a particular droid that I don't know the model name of, but as soon as I saw it, I knew exactly where it came from. If there is any Clone Wars fans, watchers here, you'll remember from Season 1 that there was an arc revolving around the Blue Shadow virus, and this particular droid was in that arc. And so it looks like they brought it over here for live action form, and they have to try and get rid of it. And I have to say this scene took way too long, and at the end it was probably a little unnecessary, and that was just my first annoyance with the show so far. They were able to get the ship back and escape after fending off some of the goons of Bib Fortuna, who, by the way, Boba mentions earlier, if I'm correct in saying, is that he was double-crossed by Bib. And this again is where one of my confusions comes from. Hearing him saying that, I was just so confused what he meant. If you remember in Return of the Jedi, Bib did not double-cross him. Boba, quote-unquote, died because of an accident that happened. So unless I'm missing something, I don't know where Boba is getting this notion that he was double-crossed, but anyways, moving on, we now officially get maybe the coolest scene in the entire episode where Boba has a score to settle with the bike gang, the Nikto Riders, who took out his tribe of Tuskens. He blows them all to hell with the Slave One in the coolest fashion using that ship. The Slave One to this day is one of the coolest ships in all of Star Wars, and it's good to finally see it's come into the show after 4 episodes. And we now have come to maybe the most confusing and annoying scene in the entire episode that to this minute I am still questioning. Boba takes the ship back to the Sarlacc pit because he's trying to get his armor back? This is where I question the writing of this episode from Jon Favreau. How does Boba not remember that he was dragged out of his armor by Jawas? If I remember correctly from episode 1, not only did he literally escape out of the pit in armor, but he was also still awake to see that armor get pulled off of him for a quick few seconds. I'm sorry, but I have to call that out. I do not understand why he needed to go back for that. And ultimately, it almost got them in trouble because he tries to look into the Sarlacc pit, which I'll admit was a cool thing to look inside. But in the end, I almost feel like that scene was just there for cool effect as he uses a seismic charge to kill the Sarlacc. And that scene also just wasted a bunch of time off the episode runtime, in my opinion. So there was that, I guess. We now leave the flashbacks and head back into present day time as we first head back into the bar, or the sanctuary as it's called, and see our boy Black Chrysanthemum just chilling and drinking away after he had been released by Boba when he was captured after he tried to assassinate him. He sees a couple of Trandoshans and gets annoyed by them as they are gambling, and he starts throwing them around as Boba enters the sanctuary. And even to some extent, I thought the scene was dragged along a little too much until we get to the main point of it all, and that is the fact that Boba actually hires Chrysanthemum for a job back at the palace. And this right here finally lifted my spirits for this episode, because a lot of people were proposing that he hire Chrysanthemum back and work with him. And so that ended up fulfilling a wish for a lot of people. We head back to the palace and see that Boba has organized a dinner with all the district leaders of Mos Espa. He works with them to come to a deal that they will not work with the Pike Syndicate if Boba eventually comes to fighting the Pikes, and they will not turn on him and remain neutral. And so they agree, while also being threatened by the Rancor, which I'll admit was a little bit of a funny scene. The final scene is just of Boba and Fennec looking out of the roof as they talk about potentially hiring other personalities of quote-unquote muscle, and when they say that, they obviously mean more bounty hunters like Chrysanthemum. As they say that, the Mandalorian music comes out of nowhere, and it got me thinking, are they going to bring Mando into this show? We still have 3 episodes left, so I'm curious to see why they ended up putting that music cue in there at the end. And that does it for episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, and another thing I will mention that this episode finishes off is all the footage that we have officially seen from the trailers and TV spots for the show, which means that the last 3 episodes will all officially be new footage that we have not yet seen yet, which I won't lie is still getting me intrigued even if I didn't like this episode all that much. And again, this was a shorter review because not much really happens in this episode, even if it was a 49-minute runtime. So I mean, again, this episode for me was my least favorite. I'm sure for some of you out there, it might also be your least favorite, or maybe it even was better for you than last week's episode, which for a lot of people, last week was their least favorite episode. So as always, guys, be sure to comment down below what you thought about the episode. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more on the channel, and I will see you guys all in the next review next week.